Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about coding puzzles. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, would you say that it's fair to say that developers who can't solve coding puzzles in the FANG style of interview exhibits, that they exhibit poor software development skills? If someone struggles with simple coding challenges, how can they be expected to solve the complex business problems of a company? Easy peasy. Depends on the puzzle question itself. So I'll give you an example. If I were to take a quiz on, in my case, Swedish, for example, that's my native language, right? And you were to pose to me a bunch of questions which relate to everyday speech that I use pretty much every single day. I'm fairly confident that I could kind of handle that because it's normal speech. It's something I do absolutely every single day. But if you, on the other hand, pose me a bunch of trivia questions related to my language, which basically is trying to stretch to see how much theory of my own language do I know, I'm probably going to crash and burn. If you present me a dictionary and you pick a select set of words that are highly sophisticated or not really common in everyday language, I will crash and burn every single time, even though I've spoken this language for my entire life. And I would argue that that is true for every single native speaker of every language in the entire world. And that is the problem with the FANG style coding challenge. So fundamentally what it comes down to isn't that, just because you have a coding challenge that is in the format of a computer science question or a puzzle or something like that, that is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. It's just a question of, all right, the question that you are posing to people is the ambition to figure out if they know how to do the job or to see how smart they are in a problem solving sort of situation, right? Because simple quote unquote coding challenges, well, if it is a simple problem, then I agree with you. Then, yeah, it's a very big testament to that people that can't solve that lack the fundamental skill to do so. But that's the key question, right? What do you mean by simple? That is the true challenge because I know for a fact, guys, that there are plenty of software developers who struggle with these more computer sciencey algorithmic questions. But at the same time, we can't just say that all of those things are irrelevant because they're not. It's just a matter of like how complex do you want to make this thing? Do you want to go all the way to lead code, like the hard challenges on lead code, where like we're talking competition level questions, where the people who are much more into, well, I will go as far as to say, based on what I've seen at the release, it's not just a question of core programming skill here. It is in some cases sophisticated mathematical knowledge and things like that that is necessary in order to solve some of those problems. Not all of them, but some of them are. And when you have, say, another favorite is graph traversals, well, you have to understand graph theory to write a REST API. I would argue no. You probably don't need to know graph theory to do that. But understanding the basics of how to do different types of searching algorithms and things like that, well, that's useful, right? Well, it is useful if you're going to implement a search algorithm or a sorting algorithm or something like that, which no one who's ever worked in anyone, practically at the very least, often the mainstream languages, is going to do on an even like some of them are probably I'm gonna raise my hand. I'm gonna say I'm pretty sure that I will go the rest of my career without ever implementing a sorting algorithm that is not just taken directly from the native sorting algorithm of the language. Sure, sorting on attributes and so forth, but like my knowledge of knowing the difference between a bubble sort, an insertion sort, or a merge sort, for example, or a radix sort or something like that, is, yeah, it was pretty cool to learn about the different speeds, but it's never served me, not a single time, as far as I can remember. I might be broad stroking it a little bit here, but I hope that you sort of see what I'm going for here. So what I would say is that if you want to figure out whether or not you're dealing with an individual who is, well, how do I put this in a good way? Like I'm a strong believer in that the the challenges that you pose to a person, and when you do interviews on any of these sort of things, right? If the intent is, I need a person to get like comfortable working with stuff that I'm doing in this role, then you should tailor your interviews towards that end goal. That is not always the goal. It sounds really counterintuitive, guys. I understand that, but like try to just understand that when you go to a company say, let's say, take Google as an example. Now, one of their famous saying is that we hire smart people. Do you think that the goal is to just figure out if you know how to write some basic code, or that you could in theory do the job? Perhaps not. I'm not going to speak on behalf of Google, but what it seems to me has always been their sort of deal is we only want to hire people who are really, 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 really smart. Not just people who can code. We want to hire people who can solve really complicated problems. And that is just not the case for every single job out there. So what I usually say is that if you want to figure out if a software developer is able to write code efficiently or if they're really, really super, super intelligent, well, those are two different sort of styles. In a coding lead, if the people who are doing lead code challenges like competitive programming, they're not there to, just write software. They're there to solve extremely complicated algorithmic problems. Now, there is no question about that. There's quite a lot of complexity in just the regular application development, but we are talking about different problems, as I like to say. It's like comparing trying to do a race car driver and a cab driver, or a person who is doing trying to perform at peak levels in a given arena, like a pro athlete doing something very, very specific with intent of winning a competition or something like that, and someone who's literally just doing exercise. Even if they're really serious about it, they might be really, really fit. Like their goal is not to win the Olympics. And so what I usually say is, go and create a code test that tests people on the stuff that is every day. Because if your software developers are struggling with, things like writing a REST API, or like connecting to a database, or creating in front and like doing CSS and HTML or JavaScript or stuff like that, or they don't know how to write tests efficiently or something like that, well, yeah, then don't hire them. For sure, don't hire them. But throwing a bunch of like really highly complex, sophisticated lead code challenging at them, and like sort of saying that they're probably not worth hiring because they can't implement a graph traversal algorithm. I understand the idea behind it, and I'm not going to be the guy who says that that's completely irrelevant. I'm just saying that make sure that you understand what you're optimizing for. Either you're optimizing for finding people who are really, really good at that thing, and they can absolutely also be good at the development. Like one doesn't exclude the others. Google proves that over and over and over, and other companies such as them. So you can have that idea, but at the same time, don't just assume that if someone isn't super, super efficient at writing lead code style or fan and puzzle types of things, like that they are not super good at that they're just bad at all things coding related. So what I want you to take away from this is that I would say that it's fair to say that if you're struggling with simple, computer sciencey questions, because that's the tricky part, right? What is simple? Then sure, let's say that that's probably a poor software developer. But at the same time, I want us to I hope that we can agree on that some of these coding challenges that you see on like LeetCode and Caddies and these sort of platforms, some of them are pretty straightforward, or like basic logic and things like that you should be able to figure out. But some of them are on the harder end, where like it's not something that you're going to face even on a regular basis in a real coding, like in an actual job. And so what I always urge my employers and my companies and so forth is to understand that you can absolutely you can mix these two things a little bit, because of course you want really, really smart people and not just people who know the tools, so to speak. But at the same time, you can't be, I don't think you should be an extremist here. I think you should have a bit of a healthy mix of these two to just sort of get a feel for the general competency of an individual. Because as I said, like it's bad either extreme. If you have someone who only knows how to solve really complicated algorithmic problems, well, that's gonna suck for you if you then put them in a regular web development team and they can't even work out how to commit some code or work with any of the processes or anything like that. And at the same time, if you have someone who knows all the tools and so forth, but just writes shit code that never works, that's also pretty bad. It's a range, it's a spectrum of things. And sometimes you have to think, I always tell people, like, try to understand the sort of role that you're looking for. If you're looking for someone who needs to be really, really, really smart with really highly sophisticated problems, then yeah, you should probably go heavier on the FANG style of interviews and so forth, because you're going to need a person who is extra good with that stuff. Just as if you need someone who's a really true senior with all the tools and knows all the practices and can like be really productive in, say, the web space in my case, well, then you're probably going to look for someone who is really good at that stuff. You can't just take someone who's really good at the algorithm stuff, because there's more to it than, you know, just the algorithms. And that's what I always preach to people. If you're going to hire someone, understand what they need to be able to do and how well they need to do that thing, and structure your coding exams appropriately. Have a great day.